Hello Internet, my name is Martin and welcome to video number 4 in my Teardrop trailer build series. I've got the frame all done, so at this point it's time to build the base or the bottom of the trailer itself. In order to illustrate this a little bit, I've gotten the trailer base modeled up a little bit here in SolidWorks, and really what I want to point out real quick is the cross members and where those are located. So kind of get a view of where those cross members are located. The tongue support isn't really necessary for this, but you'll see in the next animation loop that I've done of how I'm going to build up the base of why I've kind of laid this thing out as I have. So the base itself is going to be a 1/8 inch plywood that goes down first, and then a 1 inch frame, and this frame fits on top of the same cross members. Now, 1 inch thick frame has 1 inch thick pink foamular insulation in it, and the pink insulation is really there to keep the floor from creating condensation that we really don't want on the floor. So if you have a really cold floor, your body moisture, things you breathe out, are going to be more likely to condense on the floor and create like a mold issue. So we have a 1 inch insulation and then a really good durable 1/2 inch top overlay that goes on top of all of that for rigidity, and that will make the whole entire trailer really rigid. Now this entire laminate structure, however, does not just get all bolted down and then everything built on top of it. The whole entire laminate can actually be removed. So you'll see that in future videos where the laminate can actually be pulled out. But for now, so at this point, I'm going to find where all my tools went that I needed for this build and start to rip down some 2x4s into 1 inch thick pieces. Now what I'm doing here is actually doing a trial cut, trying to get the guide setting on the skill saw exactly at 1 inch, because what I want these spars to do is they should match up in thickness exactly to the thickness of the insulation foam that I'm using. Now, why am I not using a table saw, you might ask? Well, at this point I didn't have one. Later on in the build I actually borrowed one from a friend. However, for this I didn't have it. So you can do this perfectly fine with a standard good old skill saw. It just takes a little bit of adjustment if you want the exact right thickness for your pieces. So I'm just doing some test cuts on a piece that I had sitting around as scrap, and once I've got the depth cut measured out exactly where I want it, and I know that I'm going to get 1 inch thick pieces for the frame, I can go ahead and start to rip my 2x4. Now one thing you'll see here in this is that my power cord is dragging a little bit and wanted to catch here, and I'm just having to move it back. But we just proceed and keep doing the same thing over and over again, trying to keep our cord management so we don't cut through the power cord. It would be a disastrous time, and it's just a whole lot of processing of 2x4s to get the right dimensions that we want. Gotta check the straightness just a little bit, just to make sure that it's where we want it to be, and keep on going. Now this is by no means a fast process, so again a table saw would be better, but this ended up working out, and with a 3.5 inch wide 2x4 I'm able to get 3 pieces out of each 2x4. Now I've lost some of the footage from my builds, but that's how it kind of goes. So at this next point I've actually already got the frame built, and it's now time to cut up the 1/8 inch plywood that goes on the bottom side. So at this point I'm trying to cut it a little bit short, so worst case I can actually put the pieces together, because again this is all going to get sealed up, and it's also on the underside. So what I ended up doing with this whole entire base plate was putting epoxy laminate, or epoxy laminating the edges as well as painting the bottom side to be waterproof. Now we want to save this piece for later, so we'll have two pieces that are 8 foot long, and they'll fit in just perfectly. However, they are going to be on the long side, so what we need to do is trim them in length for the back side. So there's going to be 3 pieces of plywood that form the back. There will be the 2 halves that form the main cabin, and then 1 piece that goes across the entire span of this, from left to right, for the back end. So we'll just cut those up real quick with a good flat jig. And here what I'm doing is I'm just clamping I think it's a piece of molding that gets put on to be used as a guide. Now again, I've lost some more footage here. This is where my phone was actually full on memory. I ended up discovering that a little bit late. So at this point, I've actually already cut up the plywood for the bottom portion, and now I am putting in the styrofoam insulation that forms a little bit of a rigidity structure as well. So on its own, styrofoam and plywood, they're not that strong, but once you start laminating them together in a structure, it can become really strong. So here I'm just cutting them roughly to size with a piece of scrap wood and a razor blade, and then once you've done the quick score, the whole entire board just kind of breaks right in half. Check the board for fit, and then do any kind of minor trimming that might need to happen to get it into place. And once all the insulation's in, it's time to get the plywood cut for the top layer. Now this is 1/2 inch plywood. I went ahead and bought a little bit of extra good plywood. Now this was before lumber prices went skyrocketing. In this project, I actually got really lucky. I bought most of my plywood before prices went skyrocketing. Now here I'm once again using that piece of MDF that I bought. It's just a particulate board that's used for trim molding, but it's completely straight. One of the things that I've found for sawing and doing a lot of these things is safety gear, safety gear, safety gear. You may not think that skill saw is very loud, but I have found that it is way louder than you end up thinking. But with that straight edge guide, I can create a really good clean edge with my saw. I have plastic sawhorses that I've cut into so often ago. But with the level of dust and everything created, the dust mask, safety glasses, and hearing protection really are necessary for things like this. And once again, I'm going to trim the back ends of the plywood, get my jig aligned right, and all I'm doing is I'm using the edge of that skill saw as the guide. So instead of having that little most skill saws come with a little tiny guide piece that you stick in and screw in. I was using that guide piece for the 1-inch spars, but for this I'm just using the piece of MDF trim wood. And yeah, this is great safety practice here, using the knee as a brace to keep everything down, but sometimes you have to do what you do. Now, one of the things I want to note in this video, and you may hear it later on, is I've got the compressor going because I've been using it to clean the dust off of things as I go. I'm just doing a quick test fit here. But this is one of those hot dog compressors from Harbor Freight that's running in the background right now. And it's crap. It is so loud, it takes forever to charge up. But I ended up returning it and getting one of those job site compressors. Nice precarious work here. And now we have the back piece of plywood for the galley area. So where this seam is, on that piece of plywood that I'm just putting down, that's where the galley will actually terminate. So there will only be one seam on the plywood visible in the whole entire trailer, and that's down the center line of the main cabin. which really isn't too big of a deal. And in the end, I still haven't done it yet as of making this video, but I may or may not put laminate or some automotive carpet or something like that down. Now that we have all the pieces of wood cut and all the insulation laid together, it's time to glue everything together. So this is Gorilla Glue that I'm putting down between the top layer and the insulation. Gorilla Glue is awesome and it royally sucks. It's awesome in that it does a great job bonding to everything. It sucks because it's also great bonding to skin. And at this time in the pandemic, rubber gloves were getting hard to come across. On this back piece, I used the Loctite on the bottom side and the Gorilla on the top, just the Loctite's not shown. The compressor here is really nice and loud, so I'm going to start muting the audio on this because I don't think you guys want to hear a compressor going the whole entire time. But after I put the glue down, I'm just nail gunning the whole entire thing around the perimeter while it's still in the frame there, just to make sure that everything's going to continue to fit once I pull the whole thing out. So now at this point I know I'm going to run low on glue, so what I'm using is actually a Loctite construction adhesive to put down where the foam is attaching to the bottom plate, because I'm less concerned about this particular attachment, but doing around the corners, around the edge, and now I'm doing Gorilla Glue, the polyurethane expanding stuff on the top side. Once it's down, staple away. With some more glue again, I'm just end up going all three pieces at once, go around the edges, across through the middle, and then some extra places to fill in those triangles. Get a good glue, this thing's not coming apart. And with it, the bottom side being epoxied and painted in the end, it's going to be completely watertight, that no water's ever going to get in. And actually, one thing I forgot to mention, this is actually the frame and the bottom 1/8 inch plywood were already assembled prior to doing this. And that's the lovely sound of the compressor that I was dealing with a lot. I really hated that compressor, but they were out of stock of the one that I wanted, so I got what I could, and then ended up returning it later using the Harbor Freight 30-day rental policy. In the end, I've got the 2-gallon ultra quiet job site compressor, and it's so much better. Now that everything's all nailed up, it's time to put everything up. Put the nail gun in its case for later use, because it will be getting used later on. And with that, the base is basically done. And it's going to be on to the next video for building the frame. As you can see, it's got plenty of room to lay down in. And I look forward to seeing you all in video number 5.